If you don't know me, my name is Katie. I am the president and CEO of the Georgia Senior Living Association, and with me is Seth Daniels. Seth is our Director of Government Affairs with the Georgia Senior Living Association. Joining us on our call in just a little bit will likely be our lobbyist, Skin Edge. Skin is as busy as we all are. And so getting in between his meeting schedules and those folks that are looking to increase their dollars before elections begin, he's having those meetings. So Skin will join us likely at one point in this call. And the other person that will join us is our chair for our Government Affairs Committee and also member of the GSLA board. And that is Representative John LaHood, who has served in this role for 3 or almost 4 years with the association. It is a benefit to have a member of the General Assembly that is on our side. And we'll talk a little bit about all of the things that we've done together this year in this call that we've got. Before we get into the deep, dark conversation, the first thing is that you have a pre-survey, kind of a poll in front of you. This helps us look at learning objectives before and after conversations, and it helps Nancy and Emily, who are building our education program, know that we're building some really great things. So if you would take a moment to complete that. And then the second thing is I'd love, Seth, can you walk us through what the legislative process looks like? Folks on this call may be super educated and may know how a bill becomes a law. There was a song long before you were a child that we used to have in Schoolhouse Rock that talked about this. But if you don't know the song or don't remember the song, can you talk to us a little bit about that and tell us what happens in Georgia for a bill to become a law?
Yeah, and I know the Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a Bill song, and it's a similar process at state level. A legislator introduces a bill. The bill then is assigned to a committee in the chamber in which it started. It's voted on by that whole chamber. In Georgia, there's a deadline by which a bill has to pass that chamber that it started in to be considered by the other chamber. It's called crossover day. And then after crossover day, typically after crossover day, it could be before, but not often, the other chamber will start considering, the other chamber's bills. So the Senate will take up House bills and the House will take up Senate bills. And then from there, if it passes both chambers, it goes to the governor, and the governor can either sign it, veto it, or let it become law without signature. But Governor Kemp tends to go through things and give it an affirmative approval.
I love that. That's fantastic. All right, so we're going to, in just a moment, kind of get into what our legislative priorities were, what passed, what didn't, and that full depth of conversation. But if you are listening along with us and you've got questions, you can use the Q&A button down at the bottom to ask those questions. You can also pop them into the chat. And at the very end, we're going to spend some time answering those questions for you. So I want to highlight one of the exciting things that we got to do this year, which was our Advocacy Day at the Capitol. This is a really fun and important day and is almost always memorable for the members that are able to join us at that day. We had a successful time together at the Capitol. We had to shift some dates because of the calendaring from our folks under the Gold Dome. But once we had that day, we had really great people show up, and something happened that was exciting. Earlier that week, we had Chairman LaHood was able to introduce a bill that we had seen grow from infancy through where it is today. Seth, or welcome, Skin. Do you want to start talking about 1335, House Bill 1335? This really was our flagship legislative priority for 2024. There are other things in there too that we'll talk about, but HB 1335 came from 2 years of a lot of hard work. Skin, do you want to start talking about that, and Seth, jump in?
Sure, be glad to. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yep.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate that. 1335, as Katie says, was the result of about 2+ years worth of work. The genesis of it, of course, came after the legislature about 3 years ago passed House Bill 987, which dealt with staffing ratios in assisted living communities and personal care homes. The bill itself, you'll recall, we were okay with the bill. The problem arose when the regulations relative to that bill were issued by the Department of Community Health. And some of the staffing requirements that the regulations impose, which were not specifically mentioned in 987, frankly, were not anticipated by us, were never discussed or agreed to by us as 987 went through the process. So it became a huge problem for a lot of you, drove up costs and expenses. And, obviously, not only does it do that for you and then the residents, but frankly, staffing is just such a huge problem in general. Trying to hire the people and find the right people to fill these positions is a challenge in and of itself. So there were a lot of problems with what happened after 987. We entered into very extensive discussions with the Department of Community Health almost immediately, talked with them about it. Some of you will recall that we got the permission of the department. We submitted a request to have the rules changed before the Department of Community Health Board. There was a lot of opposition to that. A lot of the special interest groups raised up and really objected strenuously to that. And as a result of that, we ended up pulling that proposed rule. However, that led to more discussions with DCH and negotiations with DCH and some of the other interest groups. And we came up with a compromise that we felt was very positive for our industry, that would accomplish a lot of what we wanted to do. And as a result of those negotiations, we had the support not only of the department, but also of all of these interest groups like what, Katie, Co-Age and
Co-Age, Alzheimer's, Leading Age, all of the partners that we
yeah,
partner with.
all of they all supported the bill very, very strongly. And so that was great. And we worked very hard on the bill. Seth did a really good job bird dogging this bill during the session and keeping Representative LaHood and myself up to date on when meetings were coming up and that sort of thing. Then we lobbied the legislators on it, and it passed the House. John LaHood did an excellent job of getting it out of committee. It went through Chairman Cooper's committee, and she supported it. And even though she wouldn't sign it, she supported it. And it came out of her committee unanimously. And then on the floor of the House, I think it was a vote of 167-2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Overwhelming support. Then went to the Senate. The Senate hearing, on that occasion, Representative LaHood was tied up. And so I ended up presenting the bill in the committee in the Senate. We got a lot of questions on the bill. The hearing, I'm not going to say it was contentious, but just a lot of questions and a lot of discussion on the bill. But the bill did pass out of the Senate committee, and then later went to the Senate, went to Senate rules from there, and then got out of rules and onto the floor of the Senate. And Senator Ben Watson, the chairman of the Senate Health Committee, was the Senate sponsor of the bill and presented the bill on the floor of the Senate, and it passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. So it took a lot of work, a lot of time, longer than we would have liked. But I do think the process we went through and gaining the support of the department is going to pay dividends for us, and the other groups I mentioned. That's going to pay dividends for us moving forward in the future. I think, we've learned we can work together and try to come up with some good ideas that benefit everyone concerned, the industry itself, as well as the residents, the department, and these other special interest groups. So I was real proud and pleased, but it was indeed a team effort on this going back 2 years.
I love that. And it really speaks to the volume of how important relationships are. We talk about that in our industry a lot, but I think it's easy to forget that at the Capitol, it really is about relationship developing and who we can have conversations with and explain things with kind of in detail to say, we are not skilled nursing, we are something different. And this is why these rules were had some unintended consequences that we weren't obviously planning for. That's what unintended means, but that also impacted our ability to have an affordable and effective space for seniors to age in place. Seth, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what that bill did, the kind of changes that were inside of that? Because that's what impacts those folks that are on this call.
Yeah. So thank you, Katie and Skin for the recap. But yeah, so the bill does a couple things. One thing it doesn't do is it doesn't change the staffing ratios. That was one of the things that was such a point of contention between the special interest groups and the industry and the department and everybody that Skin was referencing. So the staffing ratios are the same, but within those minimum staffing ratios, if your community uses a medical alert system, you will have some flexibility about where the staff can be deployed. So, where previously you had to have somebody on every occupied floor, now you can have some freedom to move the staff around the building if you're using a medical alert system. That will have a wearable device component. There's not a requirement that residents wear them. But that was something that, it was suggested, but we didn't want it. Special interest groups didn't want it. Nobody really wanted it. So, and that's something that on the back end, assuming this goes through the governor's office and gets his okay, there will be some rulemaking from the department on the back end for that, of sort of shaping the standard for the medical alert system. So we'll be engaged on that, and we may need your help on that. We feel good about it now. We've been very clear that the medical alert system needs to be something that is sort of in use already. We're looking for, Honda Civics, not Cadillacs. Something that's going to meet the needs of the residents and their families and the communities, but not exacerbate costs on people and invade their privacy in any way. So that's a big component of it, and it gives you that much needed flexibility of staffing. The bill also allows the CMA, the medication aid, to float between memory care and non-memory care areas of the community. That was another big thing that we have been pushing for, and seemed to make sense, and nobody had a problem with that. And but as Skin was saying, just the rules that do it.
If you're just for clarity, if you're listening and you're like, hooray, because that is a hooray moment, that's a big deal. Though that CMA is not counted in your staffing ratio on either side of that door. They can float, but they're not part of your ratio, just so that you're prepared for that. Yeah.
And the staffing ratio, particularly for memory care, remains the same.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. The wearable device is specific to the assisted living side of your building, those with residents without memory care needs. But that's a big deal. We were concerned about the word floors, staffing per floor. And this just gives us flexibility to use our staff where we need our staff. If everyone's at dinner, well, you can send your staff down to the dinner room or to an activity, or be part of the community and not be stuck in a space where you may have one or no resident needs on the floor. So that's exciting. All right, so that was our main priority. When I talk about setting off fireworks, I did it multiple times this session. Once it passed the House, and then it passed the Senate, and then once it passed on the floor of the Senate, I did. If I could do cartwheels, I would have. I think Skin, I saved the text that said, "Yeah, baby." That was my favorite text of this year. And that through.
I'll add, Katie, the governor has 40 days from the end of the session to sign or veto bills. So that'll run us through about the first week. I think it's May 7th will be the deadline. So we'll know something. And we have every reason to think he'll sign the bill, but it should take place sometime between now and May 7th.
Love that. And then to Seth's point earlier, this will go through rules. we will have our voice in that space. If we need members to speak into that, we will reach out to you. We'll talk at the end of this call about how you can be involved, and that is one of the ways. All right, so we walked into, go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we move on to the next bill, which we want to do, I got a question in the chat. I just wanted to go ahead and answer before we moved on. So the wearable medical alert system, referencing the typical emergency alert system many communities already have in place. Yes, that's the goal. That's the goal. That's the department will make some rules around what is going to meet their standard. But the goal is, and what we're going to work with them on, is getting that standard close to what is the typical system that you already have in place.
Perfect. All right, so we walked into this session with one major legislative priority, which was 1335. Now, when we get into middle of session, there are things that pop up that then become a priority to us, or to have our voice heard in. We had one other bill that we kind of had to that higher level, and that was House Bill 1123. Seth, do you want to talk to us a little bit about 1123 and why it's important for us to have support in that?
Yeah, so House Bill 1123 creates a statewide adult abuse, neglect, and exploitation multidisciplinary team coordinator program, which is a lot of words. But essentially what it is that it's a program within the Prosecuting Attorneys Council to come up with best practices to investigate, prosecute incidences of elder abuse, financial abuse and fraud, and things like that. A couple of years ago, they passed a bill to allow individual judicial circuits to create this multidisciplinary team of senior advocates and of financial watchdogs and prosecutors. It hasn't been widely adopted, and so they decided that if we had a statewide coordinator to help these individual judicial circuits do that, that would help get this going. It creates a elder justice coalition that helps advise and guide best practices on combating elder abuse. And as the bill was originally introduced, it didn't have any provider stakeholders at all. There was 12 people on the list of all special interest groups, and none of them were providers. So we asked, and we were able to get the bill amended to include Georgia Senior Living as part of that coalition, so that your voice is heard there. We hope and think that this will lead to some further education opportunities down the road. Some of the recommendations that come out of that coalition we'll be able to present to you guys. But really what this does is it formalizes a working group that the former First Lady Sandra Deal started, that met somewhat regularly to talk about elder abuse. Attorney General Chris Carr tried to keep that going a little bit, but it kind of fell off. And so now this is it's brought back, it's formalized, and then most importantly, it keeps our voice in the conversation.
I love that. We've been sitting on that council that the AG had going. Again, it fell on its own just slowly. But one of the great things that came out of that was our relationship with the GBI. And if you have been around for more than a year or so, we do a REACT training twice a year that's specific to elder abuse. We talk about what our job is as mandated reporters, because it's not that we are abusers, it is that we see the abuse happen by family members or caregivers that enter our community. And this webinar helps us know what our response is and what our responsibilities are, and who to contact for each thing. So something really great came out of the history of this. And I think that we're really looking forward to having a voice at that table to represent providers in the elder abuse arena, to make sure that we are best taking care of our residents, but also the general population of senior citizens in the state of Georgia. So that's really exciting. All right, there were a handful of bills that we supported. They were maybe not ones that we ushered into the session. Mm-hmm. But they have an impact on senior living. Seth, can you talk to us first? And Skin, you can jump in wherever you want here. First was Senate Bill 449. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so most of these other bills that we were watching and were supportive of that passed. We didn't really do a whole lot with these. They had moved of their own volition, which is great. Affect licensing and workforce. Senate Bill 449 is carried by Senator Larry Walker, and it creates a pathway for a medic in the Army or a corpsman of the Navy when they leave their military service, a faster pathway to working as a CNA or an EMT. It will let that veteran go into the workforce within 12 months of leaving military service and work within their scope of practice of what they're already trained on in one of those two roles as either a CNA or an EMT. And they work provisionally for up to 12 months after that without having to take the exam. After that 12 months, they will have to be fully certified. But, we're optimistic that this will get people into the workforce faster. Other than that, there was House Bill 880. It's another military licensing bill. Helps spouses of military members who are stationed in Georgia get to work faster. In this case, work in their licensed profession where they are licensed in their home state without having to get a license here. They have to file some information with the licensing board, name and number and all that, and they have to have a job already. It, little bit remains to be seen there what the impact of that will be, because not every other state treats long-term care administrator licenses the same way we do. And so if it is not a similar licensure structure, it may not include them. And also gathering some more information on how it would include CNAs.
I'm going to jump in really quick because I know that one of the questions that will pop up even in my personal text messages right now is, that's exciting. What if they have a certificate? We know that the long-term care board right now does not recognize a certificate from another state. It has to be a licensure process. They recognize it. And so we don't know the details of it yet. We will know details as this moves forward, but knowing historically what LTC looks at, it has to be a license from a different state. Again, not all states license, some give certificates.
Yeah. And then two other bills to touch on real quick is House Bill 982 creates a high demand career list under the State Workforce Development Board. This basically is directing the state and all state agencies and local governments to take whatever money you're getting from the state or the federal government to improve your workforce in your community, and then compare it to this list of who the high demand career fields are, and just make sure that we're filling those jobs first. And we're going to be working to make sure that direct care workers are included in that list of the high demand career field. Last bill that we wanted to put on your radar that passed this year is House Bill 663. It's the No Patient Left Alone Act. This is a response to the COVID era restrictions on visitation in hospitals in long-term care settings. This bill specifies visitation rights of family members and designated essential caregivers, but still allows communities to establish and enforce reasonable rules of conduct, safety protocols, and has a lot of exceptions for declared emergencies and compliance with CDC guidance. Yeah, Skin, is there anything you want to add to any of these or any other bills?
No, only thing else I was going to say, Seth did a good job outlining those. One of the most important things we do, as Seth mentioned, we didn't take the lead on these bills. He just went over, but we follow them very closely to make sure they're not amended during the process in a way that could be harmful to all of you. You've got to stay on top of these bills. These amendments fly around, particularly in the last few days of the session, and they can totally change a bill. And we felt like the bills as they were beneficial, were going to be helpful, but we did keep a close eye on them just to make sure nothing of a detrimental impact got added to the bills, as is sometimes the case.
Yep.
Right, before we get to tort reform, because I know that there are a lot of people chomping at the bit right now wondering about that, I'd love to talk about, we had two bills that we were watching that didn't pass. I personally was really rooting for these guys because I know that we've got some administrators that would have benefited from them. But I think it's important to know that these were conversations happening at the Capitol and that although they didn't pass this year, maybe conversations that come up again soon. Can you talk to us about House Bill 1096 and 1190?
Yeah. So 1096 would have, if it had passed, create a continuing education unit tracker within the Secretary of State licensing division that would make your license renewals faster, easier. It would already be automatically uploaded there. You wouldn't have to give that information yourself. And that would include the LTC administrator license. Again, we were excited for that, but didn't get across the finish line. And another licensing bill that we were hopeful for was 1190, which would allow the licensing board staff to issue a license to someone who meets all the requirements, but the board hadn't met to made a determination to actually give the license within 60 days. So if you turn your paperwork in, you're qualified, everybody knows it, you've checked all the boxes, and you're just waiting on the board to have a quorum and to get together to meet, to give you your license, so you can get to work. Obviously that's disruptive to you in your life and your business. So this bill would have let the board staff go ahead and give you the license on the front end. Unfortunately, that one didn't get there either. But again, both of these bills we're hopeful maybe next year.
Maybe next year is a theme. I grew up a Cleveland Indians fan, no longer the Indians, but a Guardians fan, and we had a maybe next year mantra. I had a shirt that said maybe next year, but maybe next year. But talking about maybe next year, I want to talk about tort reform. Tort reform is a big deal in Georgia. It is probably, for the owners and operators that are on this call, maybe some of the biggest conversations or the weightiest conversations they're having right now, because we're seeing premium increases hike to the sky. Our deductibles have changed drastically, and it's changing our operational effectiveness in terms of our businesses as a whole. And so we know it's important. We know it's a priority, but we also know that it's a long game. This is not we can jump in and make all of the swift changes really fast. Can we talk a little bit about the possibility of tort reform as we look forward? And then there were two bills that impacted this. One passed and one didn't, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. You can clarify for that. Can we talk a little bit about the future of tort reform? If you had a crystal ball, what that's going to look like, and how we can support that as we look at 2025.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And to understand the future of tort reform, we've got to give you a little history first. Some of you may recall that at the end of last year's session, tort reform was brought up, and Governor Kemp indicated that he and his team were going to be working on a package of bills in the tort area. We were told that all summer and fall, and we were told just to kind of sit tight. They'd be releasing their package right before the session, and then we could all move forward to try to move them through. One of the things that they were interested in was what we call premises liability. When somebody comes onto your premises, the third party who comes on the premises injures a person on your premises, and then the person who's injured turns around and sues you because you supposedly didn't do enough to protect them. And you're seeing more and more of these cases being brought. It's really a serious trend and disturbing trend. But and what happens, of course, they go to court and the juries realize that the deep pocket belongs to the owner operator, not the third party who committed the criminal act in many cases. And so they hit the deep pocket defendant hard, and it's frankly it's not a very fair situation. Anyway, right before the session started in January, Governor Kemp announced that they were going to hold off on this until next year. That left everybody flat-footed. We had been assured and told they were going to be moving forward. We were ready to go. And there was, a lot of disappointment in the business community over that. And the governor has committed. He's going to be studying this all summer and fall. They have passed legislation that will allow them to obtain information from the Department of Insurance to help them analyze trends in insurance and what's really causing these substantial premium hikes, that sort of thing. So they say they're all in next year. And certainly that will be helpful if we've got the governor behind a package of some business liability reform. Two bills this year that were introduced. One is bad faith bill, and this is a situation where a plaintiff's lawyer writes the defendant, the person they're suing, or their attorney, and basically says, "I will settle for X, and if you don't pay this within so many days, if when we go to court I get more than that, then you owe extra damages, attorney's fees, court costs, all of that." And some of these practices on bad faith were getting a little out of hand, or a lot out of hand. And so the bad faith bill, which passed, it was a compromise between the business community and the trial lawyers, but I think the language is good in the bill, and to cut back and not make that such a prevalent situation and put you under the gun to settle when you frankly really don't feel like you need to or ought to. So that did pass. What did not pass was a premises liability bill. We went ahead and went forward with the premises liability bill. We want to see, what we could do. We met extensively. The Speaker of the House tapped Representative James Burchett, who is an attorney, to be the point person on the House side. I was tapped to be the lead negotiator on behalf of the business community. So I met for hours on end with Representative Burchett and the representative from the trial lawyers. To say we didn't get anywhere would be an understatement. We just couldn't come together on a compromise, just could not do it. And then Burchett turned around and filed a bill that we did not like at all. We put the full court press on it because we thought it would be a step backward, not a step forward for premises liability reform. The bill started out, as it passed out of committee, it was about 4 pages long. We put the full court press on it. By the time it came to the floor of the House, it was about 2 paragraphs long. About 90% of the bill was stricken, which was a big victory for us. That what little remained did pass the House, got over to the Senate. We had a knockdown, drag out hearing in the Senate on that. I testified in that hearing. We were there till about midnight one night fighting this bill. It barely passed by 1 vote out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where it then went to rules and was eligible to be voted on. We did not want it to be voted on. We did not want anything to pass. And Seth and I were literally there when they adjourned sine die last Thursday at 12:45 a.m. because I kept thinking they could call the bill up at any time. And I was so relieved when they did not call the bill up and they adjourned sine die shortly before 1 o'clock in the morning. So we will be back next year, be working on this all summer and fall to come up with some good premises liability language and a bill. And we feel like we'll have the governor's support on that, and that will make a huge difference. It won't be easy. The trial lawyers are a very formidable force. They throw around a lot of money in terms of campaign contributions and so forth. So it's going to be a tough situation, but we're optimistic. I think the business community, and I'm including y'all in that, I think the business community has gone from being disappointed to being mad. They're mad nothing has happened yet. They're all saying, every aspect of the business community I talk to, be it you guys, be it the insurance industry, the real estate industry, healthcare, whatever, almost every one of them says this is our agriculture. They all say this is like their number one priority to get something done. So I think we're going to be able to put together a very, very strong coalition for next year's session. And I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic, we can get some stuff done in that regard.
That is fantastic. Some of that is new information even to me in this call, and that's exciting. Tort reform is a big deal. We are business operators, but many owners too, and we've got a stake in the game. And so thank you. Thank you for that work and the long hours that you put in.
One thing I'll say too, Katie, on that, there'll be more aspects of it other than premises liability. There may be things like phantom damages, when you get when a person gets hurt, has a medical bill, and the medical bill is for $25,000, but we all know that's not what's paid. The insurance company pays, maybe $10,000.
Yeah.
But yet, under the current rules, the person can come into court and show that $25,000 medical bill as evidence, and the jury can award based on the 25 as opposed to what was really paid to settle the bill.
Yeah.
So we're going to be dealing with phantom damages. We're going to be dealing with a lot of different things. In that, if you're interested, if you're really interested in this, the state of Alabama is in the middle of doing this in their legislative session. They have got a great website. I think it's Alabama Tort Reform, something like that, where they outline all of the various aspects of tort reform they're going after this year. And it's very well done. And I've already gotten it and sent it to the governor's office for them to take a look at as they move forward. But it's something we're going to be watching. There was tort reform passed in Florida. There's been tort reform passed in Mississippi. Alabama's taking a shot at it. So all these states around us are doing it, and there's no reason why Georgia shouldn't do it as well.
Yeah, we've gotten some good names off of what our litigation looks like here in this state. All right, that was thorough. I want to move us on for time to the next aspect of advocacy that we have, but I do want to address that. Representative LaHood is not with us. He just texted. If you don't know, I shared with you that he serves on our board and as our government affairs chair, and also serves in the General Assembly, but he also is an owner-operator in Valdosta, and they had some crazy storms, and they're still sitting underneath a tornado watch, I think, right now. So please excuse him in this moment that he's not with us. And so I'm going to move us on to some of the federal aspects of what advocacy looks like and what's been happening in this first quarter of the year on your behalf, and ask you how for some ways for you to be involved with us as we move forward into the rest of the year. Many of you know that we have a relationship with Argentum. Argentum is kind of our national association. GSLA is a member on your behalf. You can become a member of Argentum on your own if you would like, your company, but GSLA manages that relationship really well, I would hope you would think, on your behalf, so that you're getting information from a federal level for actionable items, as well as things that may just be points of interest. And so Seth and I sit on lots of different committees and boards within that structure of Argentum. One of the activities that Seth got to participate in this year, which was exciting for our whole team, was that he got to join the PPI, the Fly-In event, Public Policy Institute. Seth, could you share with us some of the things that you learned at PPI, and then maybe let's move us forward to how we can be involved if there are things on a federal level that we can do?
Yeah, so PPI this year was March 11th through 13th. It was right in the middle of our state legislative session, but went up to DC and spent some time up there, talked to 3 or 4 members of our delegation. We spoke with somebody in Senator Warnock's office, Senator Ossoff's office, Representative Barry Loudermilk, and Representative Rich McCormick. And I think we stopped into Mike Collins' office too. So it was good. It was a handful of us from Georgia or represented Georgia in those groups. And we really talked about 3 big things, the 3 big bills that they're doing at the federal level. One is the Care Across Generations Act. Would give some money to, you may have seen, there are some news stories of assisted living communities around the country that have put a daycare in. And this gives the residents something something else to engage with. They go there and they help watch the kids and help them do crafts and things like that. And is really energizing for them. So the Care Across Generations Act would give some money to do that. for communities that wanted to set that up. I will caveat that with saying that that sounds lovely at the federal level, and it's somebody else's money, but there would be some regulatory hurdles at the state level that need to be considered before doing that. Should that funding become available from the federal government. The other thing that we talked about was the Senior Act, and this, sort of similarly to one of the workforce initiatives at the state level, would redirect some existing funding and existing workforce programs to direct care workers. And that's a federal directive. The last one, excuse me, is that we talked about, is a VA pilot program to pay for assisted living. Right now, the VA will pay for nursing homes, and nursing homes obviously do not meet the needs of a lot of veterans. And as the Vietnam veteran generation is getting to the stage of life where they're looking at assisted living and other living settings, we can meet some of their needs through assisted living, but the VA won't pay for it. So that was something we got a lot of good reception on that. Budget neutral, not asking for new money, just saying, hey, take some of the money you already spend on nursing homes, put it towards assisted living. And oh, by the way, assisted living costs half as much. So, so those were good, and we had good conversations. Argentum is sort of the lead on our federal stuff, but they tell us what's happening, and we'll put it out to you when we know more.
I love that. Now, in the middle of our session and in a few weeks leading up to PPI, there was a big thing that happened, and that was the Senate Committee on Aging. And they had a hearing that really brought to light some of the difficulties that maybe families have inside of procuring the right assisted living communities for them. But it also showed us that there was a vast misinformation sharing or non-knowledge pool inside of our federal legislator. Our this committee, after the conversation happened, you may have watched it live. It was televised. Our Senator Warnock sits on this committee. Inside of this committee, they kind of left saying, we want to do research. We want to know more. One of the ways that that research impacts us on this call and the GSLA membership at large is that they've opened a comments portal, basically a place for providers and family members and even residents, if they have that ability, to go in and leave their comments on why assisted living is a valuable asset to our communities at large, as well as an asset to our families. And so when you get the follow-up email to this call in the next day or so, you'll get a copy of this recording, of course. You're going to get some highlights on those bills that did pass, things that will impact your business this year. Seth will make sure that you've got some links if you want to do research on those. I'm going to see if we can get that link that Skin just shared about in Alabama on the tort reform. I think that might be interesting for folks to get their eyes on. But also I'm going to add the link where you can share your thoughts with the Senate Committee on Aging, and you're able to share that out with your families and residents through a newsletter and ask them for their response. We're not pushing this in a large, significant way because I think there is a lot of research that's going into this. But if you have the ability to respond, I think it's valuable to have an educated voice in the assisted living arena leaning into the conversation that AL is different than SNF. Personal care homes and that world, it's different than SNF. Memory care, although components on both sides, there's a choice-driven option through what our providers have. And so I think that that will be beneficial for you to be involved. We're going to talk about a few ways for you to be involved as we kind of get towards the end and as we get to some Q&A about things that happen. But before we do, one of the ways that folks can get involved is our PAC, the Political Action Committee. Seth, do you want to share with us a little bit about our PAC? I'm going to talk about it a little bit too, but will you share some high-level stuff with us about PAC?
Yeah. I like to say the PAC is like PBS. It's funded by viewers like you. And it's a really important tool for us, for Skin and I to get out there and meet with legislators during session, legislators meet 200 people a day. It's hard to stand out if that's going to be your only interaction with them. But the PAC can help us get some of that time. The PAC checks opens doors for us to get a meeting, to spend some time with them in a more, not as chaotic, a little bit more intimate sometimes. Could be breakfast, could be lunch, could be a fundraiser, could be, golf, shooting, whatever. So it's a very important tool for us to engage with legislators. The government affects every level of your organization, from the C-suite down to the direct care providers, to the direct care workers. As you've seen from some of the bills that we've talked about today, they're getting into everything. And so we need to be able to have your voice heard. And again, the PAC is an important tool to let us do that. Georgia law lets us take PAC contributions from individuals, companies, corporations, provider members, IPs, anybody. If you got it, we want it. We can take it. And we need everybody's support. We need everybody's real support. Not only is it sort of important in principle, but with some recent changes to campaign finance law, creating these leadership committees, they're asking for more support. As Georgia becomes more competitive, both Republicans and Democrats are asking for more campaign support, and for us to keep the seat at the table and keep your issues on their radar. We need to be able to meet that demand. So that means more money. Katie, you're muted. Skin, did you want to add something to that too?
I'm just sorry. I was just going to add to what Seth said. Is last year, the response we got from all of you for our PAC was the biggest we've ever had, by far. It was tremendous, and it enabled us to support people who've been supportive of our industry.
Right.
It allowed Katie and I to attend a retreat with the Senate leadership. That it was just invaluable to get her in front of those people and let her educate them on issues that we're interested in. So it's very key, and I just want to thank you for what you did last year, and I hope we can do that again this year, because it was really tremendous.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say, is that your support, it's more than just saying, hey, give money so we can give money. It really is. We're supporting people that understand our industry. We're supporting people that are curious and want to affect change. And we are supporting people that do, in fact, affect change. A lot of the conversations that we had in this session that helped craft House Bill 1335 into what it became, they really originated because we developed a relationship, and some of that is attributed to how PAC dollars are important in our space. So, okay, before we get to questions, I want to talk about what GSLA does for you in an advocacy world versus what we really love to ask you to do as providers in the advocacy world. GSLA, you may have heard a little bit about this at the conference last year. I talk about it a lot because I think what we do in terms of advocacy is so important to our industry. We're state regulated. We need to spend our time, our money, and our efforts inside of this space. GSLA brings to the table a couple of unique things that maybe you don't have the time or ability to do. We advocate with legislators on your behalf. We do this often on a daily basis, especially during the legislative session. We've got a presence at the Capitol between Skin and Seth, and obviously we have John that's part of that, but Skin and Seth, when they're in that space, they are talking senior living. Seth talks nothing but senior living when he's in that space, and Skin advocates for us in the business perspective and in the senior living perspective. We're invited into committee presentations. We're called on as subject matter experts because of the relationships that these two and others are building at the Capitol. We also hold the relationship with state departments. Many of you will call with administrator license questions, and we've got the call right into the LTC board and the Secretary of State, or you come with regulatory questions. This is the more often than not, I think we get, a large 2 handfuls or more every week of, I'm having this issue with a surveyor. I have this question about rules and I'm not quite sure what it means. And we're able to walk in on your behalf to bring those questions to the forefront and keeping you anonymous while you're figuring that out, but really offering clarity to some of the regulations that sit around us. And then GSLA advocates for you on a national level. We do this through Argentum, but we do it on a consistent basis. Seth and I are always on Argentum calls about what's the next best thing. We literally are. Did you see his eyebrows raise? We've got one this afternoon. But what is the next best thing for us to do? How are we stepping in? Who are we calling and what connections are we making on a national level that could help us grow our industry and bring better understanding to what we do and why we exist. And so that's just kind of a little nugget of when you see GSLA, our education, advocacy, and partnerships, that's a little nugget of that advocacy piece of what we do. You see education and you see partnerships on a consistent basis. You're involved in those directly, but you don't see advocacy as often, although it's still a significant portion of what we do. And there are ways that you can be involved in this part of what our mission is. The first is responding. We send out advocacy alerts throughout the course of the year. Many of you responded, and thank you so much. When we needed letters and calls to the DCH board, as we were going prior to this session, as we were going before the DCH board to talk about the change of rules. You joined in that conversation. Sometimes it's a national push, and we're asking for one of our senators or representatives to sign on to a proposed bill. So you acting on those advocacy alerts, that's actually a very big deal. It is a quick email in your life that has a lasting impact on the life of senior living. And then sometimes we have specific asks that come from the association. Hey, we have a legislator that we need to get into a building. Can they come to your building? And so thank you so much for doing that. Responding to those asks are really, really big. Sometimes those asks are, hey, can you contribute to PAC or show up at this event, which helps fundraise for PAC. So it's not just a donation, but it is an experience. And when you show up to things like that, it shows our industry partners that GSLA is here. And it shows our legislators that it means business when we do show up. So showing up is a big deal. Community invitations is also something that's really important. Seth is going to talk about this in just a moment. But I want you to know that we have a tool. It's a toolkit online. There will be a link in the follow-up email to our toolkit. So you're not walking into events or inviting someone into your community without knowing what to do. We've pulled together a toolkit that walks everything from how to invite your local legislator through the process of who should be on the tour with them and what you should talk about. And it ends with how to write the thank you note. Who does it need to go to and what needs to be included? We tried to make this tool extremely easy for you to invite your state legislators into your building, for them to see the difference that you're making and the economic impact that's a driving force inside of their districts. So we have that advocacy tool. Seth will talk about that in just a second as we close. And the last thing is PAC. I will never stop talking about PAC. I am a recovering 501c3 staff person, so I feel like I asked for money for a living for a long time. But our PAC dollars, they make a significant difference. They change the level and the tone of our voice, and they give us a seat at the table. So when someone needs a subject matter expert, there is no question of who that expert is. They're not calling nursing home, they're calling GSLA. Why? Because we have spent time and effort and dollars to make sure that they are the most educated people in the room when they're talking about senior living. So PAC is drastically important. Inside of that email will be a link also to PAC just donations, but join us at the Golf Classic that's coming up in May, and that helps, the proceeds from that help fund our PAC throughout the course of the year. Seth, before we get to Q&A, do you want to talk about community visits and the value of those?
Yeah, that is something that we would really like to do this year. You know, it's going to be very important to have them there so that legislators can see what it is, you know, what assisted living is, what senior living is, and not just assisted living, it's senior living, and the challenges you face and all the different touch points to government that you have. You know, when I'm there and I'm talking to them, I'm talking about words on paper. but this is your life and your business and your day to day. And if they can be there and they can see it and they can hear it from you, that makes a difference. Not that they don't care what I say, but it's just more meaningful coming from a constituent and seeing there and seeing your day to day and your residents' day to day and understanding how important your business is to your residents' lives as well. I'm happy to help set anything up. If you're interested in doing that, please let me know. If you have already begun the process of doing that, please let me know. If you've got it going on, everything's fine, you don't need my help, still would just like to know about it. But of course, would like to be there if I can. And yeah, and we just think that this is going to be really, really important. Even in non-election years, this is election year. How to meet as many people as possible is going to be at the tops of a lot of legislators' minds in an election year. And so that is an aspect. But even in a non-election year, it's educational.
Mm-hmm. And you lead communities of voters. I hope that's part of your welcome packet, is how to register a voter in the place that you live. And so these are voters that are in buildings. So there's a lot of education, as Seth is talking about, but there's also an informational component to those visits. So please let us know. We want to highlight those folks that have legislators in as well in our weekly email. I think it's valuable for other communities to see what your partners across this space are offering. So I'm going to jump us into some, actually, I want to say one other thing. It's important that your community knows how the voting process works and how to educate your residents. We've got a GSLA member that offers a lot of resources for the voting process for your residents, and that's been inside of our weekly emails for a couple of weeks right before our last election season, so about a month ago. But we'll make sure inside of this email that you receive that there is also a link to the voter information that would be helpful and beneficial as you look at your building residents also as voting constituents. Now, if there are any questions, if you've not asked a question, if you've not texted it to me individually and I haven't answered, that now is the time. We have just a minute or two to answer any questions that may pop up. But if not, Seth, while they're asking questions, can you just share your email very quickly? I think that's helpful for folks to know where you are.
Yes, I'm going to drop it in the chat, but it is seth@gasla.org, GASLA.org. That's how I remember it.
It is what our email address is.
It's like Wednesday. So, but I just put that in the chat. It is just simply Seth@GASLA.org.
All right. So this is a non-question group, and that's fine. What I will say is your voice is as, if not more important than ours in our advocacy arena, but we have the privilege of helping lead you through that. And we have an honor and a good responsibility that we hold close to our heart to advocate and stand on your behalf underneath the Gold Dome on a daily basis through these first quarter of the year, the 40 days that are really dedicated to affecting change for the following year and the future in Georgia. And it really is an honor to stand in that space. So if you've got questions throughout the course of the year about government affairs, Seth is your right-hand man. He can answer a lot of those questions. And if he can't, we can help find an answer. If your questions are about regulations or about your administrator license, if you send them to Seth, he'll send them to the right person. He is not the right person, but we'll get them to the right person. But it is an honor to serve with you in this space. Pay attention to the PAC invitations that come, those advocacy alerts that come. Let us know how we can step in on your behalf and invite folks to your community. We want to be there. We want our legislators to know that senior living is big, it is bad, and it's staying in place. So with that, I think we're going to head out for the day. Thank you all so much for making this a valuable moment in your Wednesday. We'll talk to you all very soon.